The year is 1898, and we are in New York City. And as we were just shown, Nikola Tesla was building his tower, but it's a way more important year. It's also the year for urban planning. This is the first time in history there's a global urban planning conference, and it's happening right here in New York City. And urban planning is, contrary to popular belief, not a science or a practice that comes from architecture, but it's a science that comes from public health. The first urban planners were, not surprisingly, physicians that were worried about the living conditions in cities and the effects it had on humans and their health. The conference topics: air quality, smelly cities, noise pollution, traffic deaths. The year is 1898, and we are in New York City. Cities are smelly. The air quality is horrible, and the noise pollution has become so bad that cities like New York have introduced a no pollution zone, a no heavy transport zone around those most vulnerable, hospitals and schools, just to avoid the most vulnerable to be affected by the things that happen in the city. And at the same time, 1 in 17,000 New Yorkers die every single year because of traffic casualties. And this issue has become so bad that 1898 is also the year that Sir Ebenezer Howard introduces the concept of a garden city. Something that has the perks of the city, but without the noise, the smell, and the death to it. The cause of all of this? The horse. And more importantly, horse emissions. The year is 1898, and the main, or more or less only, topic on the conference are these horse emissions. And as you know, horses have fairly high emissions: methane, I was told yesterday, CO2, and other greenhouse gases come from manure. But more importantly, apart from the regular emissions, horses also have a tendency of dying. And that often happens mid-transport. So that would mean that there's a dead horse in the middle of your streets, which causes quite a lot of traffic, as you can imagine. But because, as some of you may know, horses are also fairly big, it's hard to take care of them. So what the city cleaners would often do is leave the corpse to rot for a few days, so it would be easier to cut and dispose. And even though horses are a very vital aspect of a city's industry, they come with some serious side effects. Scientists warn about cities being clogged. If we don't change what we do, we're going to have over 3 meters of horse manure in our cities. Cities introduce pollution-free zones, and they try to reduce horse ownership and horse usage, just to make the city a better place. And the horse breeding industry obviously doesn't love this. They promise efficient horses, faster horses, horses with lower emission, and if possible, they probably have discussed horses that cannot die. But I'm not sure about that last one. In the year 1898, we're still in New York City, and what the people at the Urban Planning Conference probably didn't know is that 1,000 kilometers westward, the solution was on the way. In the small town of Dearborn, Michigan, a man introduced a bicycle with 4 wheels, a so-called quadricycle. And the revolutionary thing about this quadricycle was it didn't need a horse to go forward, it used an internal combustion engine. And this man is Henry Ford. Yes, the automobile was once introduced as a solution to an environmental city problem. Cars provided cleaner air than horses, they were less smelly than horses, they had less noise than horses, and they were a lot safer than horses. However, large transitions like these don't go overnight. There wasn't enough infrastructure to put fuel in your car. Cars didn't go very far. The range was very limited. They were fairly expensive. Every accident was heavily covered in the media. And people were so scared of them that some cities introduced a red flag traffic law, which meant that for a car to go into a city, a man waving a red flag would have to walk in front of them to warn people of the dangerous monster coming into their streets. Newspapers stated that cars couldn't be insured, and politicians stated that we should use up all the horses first and at least save the jobs of the horse breeding industry. Some towns like Nantucket even took it so far that they prohibited the car to come into, and they demanded that a horse towed it forward instead of an internal combustion engine. The horse breeders at the same time were putting their efforts on more efficient horses and horses with lower emissions. And that sounds very familiar to most of us. Well, we all know how history unfolded, but with the parallels with the current debates on self-driving electric cars are uncanny. Scientists warn about clogged cities. No pollution zones are introduced in cities. Air quality is still a major problem. And so are the more than 1 million annual traffic deaths around the world. So why don't we have electric robot taxis yet? Well, cars are still considered symbols of status. The car dealers are fighting the transition. And some people in the car industry even don't love what's going on. The cars still have a limited range and are considered fairly expensive. The insurance problem is still on the table. And every autopilot accident is heavily covered in the media, and so is every fully self-driving car accident. Who's responsible? We're still debating on it. And some politicians state that we should use up all the oil first. In the current transition, we see the same assumptions that are based on our current worldview when it comes to electric self-driving cars. And the first cars looked like bicycles and chariots for a reason, because that's what we were used to. It's therefore not surprising that if you ask someone to draw a picture of a self-driving robot taxi, they often come with an automobile, because that's what we're used to. And it's also why some people just simply don't believe in self-driving electric cars, or they can't believe that they can give up their own vehicle, or they simply enjoy driving too much and won't let the government take that away from them. It's the same way of thinking, it's the same limitations that we've seen over 100 years ago. And it's the same limitation in our imagination as well. As said, my name is Gijs van der Poel, and I've done my studies here a few miles up north at the University of Amsterdam in mobility planning, which is a part of urban planning. And when I finished my degree, I went up north to study energy transitions, to study data modeling and innovations. And with that background, I currently work in the field of sustainable mobility for a company called Overmorgen, which means about tomorrow in Dutch. And for a sustainable tomorrow, we need to change the way we look at mobility. Cars are changing, hence this Congress. Engines become electric, ownership is moved to shared vehicles, and sensors and computers becoming so advanced that cars can practically drive themselves. And the transition will take place because two major parties benefit. Cities benefit from electric robot taxis because it frees up valuable space, because there are less parked cars in the street. They benefit because streets become safer, because there are less accidents happen, and less, but definitely not least, there's less noise and air pollution. But at the same time, you as an individual benefit, and that might be even more important, because for the price of owning a Fiat Panda, you can be driven around in the newest Tesla Model S. It won't happen if you don't benefit as a person. It won't be facilitated if the city doesn't benefit from that. But if both players are in play, these kind of transitions can go really, really quickly. This is going to impact cities in many, many ways. Ways that we may not even be able to understand or even imagine. But because this transition affects a city and the way we look the world around us so heavily that cities are preparing for it, looking into it, and sometimes even facilitating it. And that might range from introducing the proper charging infrastructure to just get the permits ready to get this going. And in order to understand the impact, I'm peeking into the future by looking at free floating shared electric cars cars that are contrary to an internal combustion engine that you own individually somewhere on the streets and can be picked up and dropped off anywhere within the operating system. And in order to understand car usage, you start by analyzing and explaining mobility patterns. Well, in mobility planning, there are 3 reasons why people move. They either live somewhere, they work somewhere, or they're visiting. And if you know where your target group lives, works, and what they visit, you can predict and design a charging network and a shared electric vehicle system accordingly. And we've used this approach for privately owned electric vehicles and helped over 75 municipalities to run this model for and help them to build a proper charging infrastructure. But because this shared electric vehicles are coming up so quickly, we feel the urge to introduce it as well. And in order to do so, that was a sneak preview. And in order to integrate shared electric vehicles into this approach, we've initiated a 3-stage project. First of all, we execute a literature research that looks into the differences between shared cars and individually owned cars in terms of patterns. Time of usage, type of usage, what type of locations, etc., etc. Where are they picked up, where are they left off again? And what you see here, this is the city of Amsterdam, you see a very scattered usage. And this is one of the first images we have. We see very scattered usage because there's a variety of reasons why people use this car. More often than not, they're used as a last mile solution or as a backup for other modes of transport. If you take a bicycle to your work, or if you take a bus, you take a shared electric vehicle to if the bus drivers are on strike or you have a flat tire like me this morning. The second part of the literature is a literature study, or second part of the research is a literature study on the question what elements influence the success of a self-driving electric or a shared electric vehicle system. And this is in terms of geography and functions. So instead of looking where people normally want to go, you're going to look at the city and say what type of places are interesting. And if you want to introduce a successful free-floating electric car sharing system, which is quite a mouthful, you need a functioning charging network, and the charging network needs to be robust and it needs to be in the right places. Where are electric cars likely to be picked up and dropped off? But more importantly, where do people want to charge? Where are these electric cars going to charge? How long? What are their charging profiles going to look like, etc., etc. And the third part of the research consists of empirical research. Together with the University of Applied Sciences in Amsterdam, we've collected, as you see, quite a bit of data on where of a major shared electric vehicle operator in the city of Amsterdam, whose name I'm not allowed to mention. And we've collected their charging and their parking time, locations, battery size, levels, etc., in order to determine what the patterns look like and where your charging network needs to be. And we're going to test the hypotheses coming from the first 2 analyses that we've done, but also looking at other ideas and whatever else not. And even though I've gone through an endless amount of scientific literature, I really am really looking for more input on this. So if you're a city who wants something like this, if you have any ideas on something like this, or if you're an operator, or have just simply come across anything regarding this topic, please don't hesitate to contact me. This research into electric car sharing will provide a sneak preview into the future. And even though no one is able to provide a detailed description of what the future is going to look like, a best educated guess can be as valuable at this moment in time. And such a best educated guess is used using research, using common sense, using the imagination, but last but not least, looking into history. And what history has shown is that we don't longer use the horse as our main mode of transport, but we use a car. And we do that not because we ran out of horses, but simply because the automobile was the better option. Both for the cities as it reduced noise pollution improve the air quality, less traffic deaths, and reduce the smell, but also for you as a person, because for the price of a horse, you could get a cooler horse. A cooler cherry. Thank you.